special edition of Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos live on Parliament Hill. It is the first day of the House of Commons. MPs are back here in Ottawa. They're not the only ones here in Ottawa. In fact, today was a big day for this city and for this country, with King Charles and Queen Camilla touching down. Late in the, or early, I should say, in the afternoon, they made their way through a number of special moments here in Ottawa, including meeting with the Governor General at Rideau Hall. That's the most recent event. And then the King is slated tomorrow to deliver the throne speech. The House, as I mentioned, is also back. It's been more than 5 months since MPs were here in the House of Commons. And here's a taste of how things went today.
At the end of a mandate, when things tend to get a little feistier, I would remind members that we are at the beginning of a mandate in the selfish hope that you will afford me a little grace period.
I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason.
We, parliamentarians, must provide ruthless scrutiny on every dollar taken out of their pockets, every infringement on their liberties, and every single decision this government makes.
We're going to start off our coverage tonight from the House of Commons with Government House Leader Steve McKinnon. All right, hi, Minister.
It's a pleasure to be
good to
here.
see you. A full 48 hours,
Welcome
I think.
back to the House of Commons.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I hope you are as well. I wanted to start off actually on some of the things that are going to be important to Canadians here, and primarily this tax cut that your government has promised. I know we spoke last week. Have there been any additional conversations with members of the opposition that give you confidence that that will most definitely happen?
Well, look, I'd be very surprised that any party or any member in this House would be against an income tax cut that would apply to every single tax-paying Canadian, which is what we will be presenting very, very shortly. You'll obviously have to ask them what their reaction is to that tax cut when it's tabled, but I'm pretty confident that this will meet with all party support.
Will you be introducing it this week?
Yes.
Okay, and then on the potential for other parties to support it, in particular, I wanted to ask you about the New Democrats, because they had asked you for official party status, that
Yes.
they didn't meet the threshold. You have denied that request. Why?
Well, to be clear, I didn't deny the request. In the law, 12 members are required to have recognized party status in the House. So I was merely stating fact. In order to change that, it would require a broad consensus of the House of Commons, a consensus that I'm unaware exists as of this point. However, there have been a number of constructive conversations with Mr. Davies. I know he's had some with some of the other opposition parties. He certainly has with me. I'm very open to entertaining some of his more practical requests. Those discussions are ongoing. I can't tell you when they will culminate, but we will not either be an obstacle to those discussions reaching their endpoint. So I'm going to continue doing that, and we very much want to honor the history and the traditions and the role of the New Democratic Party.
So let me understand that again, because yes, you didn't explicitly deny, but you are an obstacle in the way of forming that consensus. It is the view of the government that they should not be given official party status. Is that correct?
Well, 7 members out of 12. This is something conferred on me by Parliament. I don't get to change laws on a whim.
But you could enable a process that could.
But the Parliament of Canada Act is kind of in a separate category of law where you want to have broad consensus among all parties in the House. That number has been pretty stable at 12. I think New Democrats understand that they're well short of that number, so we've really focused our conversations on other more practical ways that we can honor the traditions, the history of the New Democrats.
That tax cut that you will introduce this week is part of a parcel of things that were promised during the campaign, echoed through the mandate letter and in the speech to caucus by the Prime Minister yesterday, that have, in my view, a very specific focus: transforming the economy, in his words,
Yes.
into the strongest in the G7. Why should we trust the party that weakened our economy to now strengthen it?
Well, I don't know that that would be a fair characterization, but I will say that we are committed to strengthening the Canadian economy. We have housing challenges. The GST cut on new homes is absolutely aimed at both affordability and with meeting this housing challenge, making houses more affordable for first-time and new home buyers. We want to absolutely reduce the income taxes that Canadians pay, another affordability measure. These things in and of themselves will strengthen the economy, but there will be some more proposed structural reforms in the way, in the form of this bill that we've been discussing that was committed in our platform to remove interprovincial trade barriers, to make it more easy to work across this country, to make it more easy to build a 21st century economy in Canada. We'll be focused very clearly on that. You saw the Natural Resources Minister, I think, outline a vision for growth to the Calgary Chamber of Commerce last Friday. All of the things that I think we'll be presenting will be very, very consistent with a vision of economic growth. And as the Prime Minister has said, we can do more things for ourselves than others can try and deny us.
It's not mine. When you say it's not a fair characterization, it's not mine. It's actually the Prime Minister's. During the Liberal leadership, he said, our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats. From President Trump, he pointed to, for example, over the last 5 years, economic growth being driven by the big increase in the labor force, which was largely because of the surge in immigration and by government spending. So again, when you talk about all of these things that are structural in nature, I'm not sure why Canadians should be convinced that this government, which was the same party in the last government responsible for weakening the economy, will all of a sudden turn things around to the point where we all become the strongest economy in the G7. This
is a new government, a new leader, new set of priorities. You saw the marching orders that we got in the form of a mandate letter last week that outlined 7 very, very focused priorities designed to achieve that kind of economic growth in this country. We have some 70 new members of Parliament. This is a renewed, refreshed team, certainly with a number of new ministers, a new Prime Minister at the top, and I know we're excited to dig in.
The objective, though, is so explicit, to transform the economy. If we, for example, take the strongest economy in the G7, at the U.S., last year it grew by 2.8% real GDP. Canada only grew by half that, 1.5%. When you talk about removing internal trade barriers, your government talks about that potentially adding $200 billion to the economy, but that's only at full tilt. If all the federal and provincial barriers are removed, including supply management, which no party in the House of Commons is willing to go near. Realistically, what kind of change economically is your government going to affect? Because the stats don't necessarily bear out your rhetoric.
Well, we think that there's an important leadership component to the things that we'll be doing, Vashi. And the bill that we will be proposing absolutely will, yes, add to our GDP in and of itself.
By how much?
But we'll send, well, I'm not going to get into those numbers, but what I will say there is a target-rich environment there. There is a lot of growth that we can unlock in the Canadian economy if both the federal government and the provinces and territories collaborate on making the economy more fluid, on getting rid of useless and needless regulations, on making it easier for professionals and tradespeople to work right across this country. We can do great things for our economy, and this is the federal government making its contribution to the problem itself, but also demonstrating leadership.
But even right now, right, you can't be explicit, and your government has not been thus far, in what exactly is going to be the economic consequence, because you're using very heavy rhetoric. We're going to transform this economy. We're going to be the strongest economy in the G7. We are not right now. We are nowhere close to that, particularly on a per capita basis. And nobody can tell me, even by this one piece of legislation, how much better the economy is going to get.
Look, we know we've had persistent struggles to achieve our targeted economic growth in this economy. We've had a lot of headwinds. We have a trade environment that is becoming a lot more difficult, needless to say. We've had wars in the Middle East, war in Europe and Ukraine. There have been a lot of headwinds for this economy, but we're not going to be making those excuses. We want to put in place.
But you kind of are. To be fair, that's what your government under Justin Trudeau kept doing.
No, I'm describing the headwinds against which we will be applying a whole bunch of economic medicine. One of the big down payments on that will be this bill that we're talking about to make our country's economy more fluid. You saw the Natural Resources Minister talk about other elements of our economic growth plan. We'll be investing in infrastructure. infrastructure that will be trade enabling, that will enable us to open markets around the world for our exports, whether that's ports or railway facilities, inland ports, what have you. There are a whole bunch of things that we can do to unlock growth in the Canadian economy that we can do for ourselves, that no one else can take away from us. Mr. Carney has us very, very focused. Let's make no bones about it. Mr. Carney's singular focus is on achieving growth and wealth for Canadian households.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister McKinnon, pleasure as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the government's House Leader, Steve McKinnon. Let's get the perspective from the opposition. Joining me now, live here from Parliament Hill, is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman. Hi, Ms. Lantsman. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
I appreciate you making the time. I wanted to start off on something that Minister McKinnon was talking about, this middle-class tax cut. He says will be introduced through Parliament this week. Is your party going to support that?
Well, look, we haven't seen anything on the table, but we've come out with a very, very clear set of priorities of what we want to see to make life more affordable for Canadians. Of course, Mr. Carney has taken some of those ideas. He certainly ran with some of those ideas in the campaign. So we encourage him to take those Conservative ideas. But when that comes to the floor of Parliament Hill, we'll look at it and scrutinize it as an opposition would, and we'll make that decision when it happens.
In principle, if it is straight up and down the middle-class tax cut that they say it's going to be, in principle, does your party support that?
Well,
I think Canadians are interested.
Yeah, look, we've seen this. We've seen this before, where they've said something is coming to the House and it doesn't look like that at all. So we'll wait to see it. But anything that is going to make life more affordable for Canadians, that is going to reduce the tax burden, inflation, the cost of living, the cost of government, that's our number one priority here for Canadians, for the 8 million people that voted for Conservatives, and for those who didn't.
I wanted to pick up on something you talked about, and sort of that I heard a lot from the leader in the House, Andrew Scheer, today, kind of roasting the government for taking ideas that the Conservative Party had put forward. Shouldn't your party be happy that those are being pursued rather than kind of dismissive of the government for picking up what you would characterize as good ideas?
We're certainly not dismissive of the government, but you have Mark Carney, who always, who on the campaign trail said that a plan is better than no plan, and we have yet to see a plan. So we're going to push for them to put a budget as a plan. First of all, throne speech is not a plan. It is a set of priorities. So we want to see an actual plan on the table. And if those include Conservative ideas, then we encourage them to take more of those.
So why are you making fun of them for doing so?
Well, look, I think that they've taken those ideas, or at least they said they've taken those ideas, but we haven't seen legislation yet that takes the burden of the carbon tax off the table. We haven't seen the elimination of that carbon tax. We haven't seen anything on crime, on the chaos, on the drugs, on the disorder in our streets. We certainly haven't seen a middle-class tax cut yet. I understand that the House is coming. So when we see those solutions, and if they happen to be Conservative solutions, then we'll encourage him to take those ideas and run with them.
What does it say about your party that Canadians ultimately, a majority of Canadians decided they'd rather see the Liberals implement those ideas than your party?
Yeah, look, I think we've got a mission ahead of us, and it is 5 clear priorities of reducing the cost of living, of making sure that we build affordable homes in this country, reduce the cost of building and the regulation around it, that we do something on immigration, a system that has been broken by the Liberals, that we address crime, and most importantly, that we grow the economy, that we attract investment in this country. That's what we're going to go back to the House with. That's what we're going to start the session with. That's what we're going to advocate for Canadians. And more than that, we'll show them that there is a government in waiting. We'll restore hope for those who felt like this in December and certainly still felt like this on Election Day, those 8 million people that voted for Conservatives. We have a responsibility to them and to instill hope and change. And if it is pushing the Liberals to do that, that's exactly what we're going to be here to do.
But with all due respect, my question was about why Canadians ultimately, in this election, did not think that you were more than a government in waiting.
Well,
and even what you outlined, the things that you just talked about are very much what we hear from Prime Minister Carney and from the Liberals. And ultimately, there was a difference, right? Yes, a record number of Canadians voted free, but a record number of Canadians voted for the Liberals as well. Like, what kind of introspection has your party done on why that is the case?
Yeah, look, I think anytime you win or lose an election, there are things to look at about what you can do better. But going into the House and going into the session and going into the year, we're going to advocate for those things on Canadians. And if Mark Carney wants to talk about these things, that's one thing. But we want to see implementation. And I think the judgment of that from Canadians will be if he's able to implement, if he's able to deliver results. And right now we actually see the opposite of that. We've got ministers sort of freelancing about housing prices not having to go down, about not building pipelines, about working from home, and we see the government's first order of business is not to present a budget in a timely way for Canadians. So I think Canadians will be the judge of this government, and will continue to be the vigorous opposition and scrutinize the legislation that comes to the House.
And look, I do take your points on all that you just pointed about the government. I've asked the ministers the very same questions around accountability on all of that. But you kind of brushed aside my question about your own party's role in the outcome. And I'll put to you, look at all the shadow ministers. Everybody's in basically the same position. Nobody will really talk about, what kind of introspection you're doing or that you even really fell short. Like, what is the consequence of the election outcome for your party? And it's not just that you lost. It's that you lost when 6 months ago you were going to win.
Look, I think that, again, every time a party wins or loses, there's introspection that needs to happen, and the details of what that looks like will certainly make that clear to you when we decide sort of how to go about it. But I think there's been lots of introspection from from members of this party, from the new MPs that are here, maybe why they won, which kinds of coalitions. We've got to build out to attract more Canadians to the coalition while keeping the ones that we have. And there is, I think, plenty of time to look at what went right and what went wrong. But for now, we're focused on providing hope for all of those Canadians who did vote for change and who do expect us to scrutinize and oppose this government where appropriate and work for all Canadians where it is appropriate.
Is there culpability? Like, does somebody or some role need to pay a consequence for what happened? And I ask specifically about Mr. Poilievre, for example, who lost his own seat, who your party's caucus voted to adopt the Reform Act, leaving open the possibility of a leadership review, or Jenny Byrne, the campaign manager. Do either of them need to suffer the consequences of the significant loss?
Look, I think it's very clear. Certainly, Pierre has my full support, and he has the full support of caucus going forward. I think he delivered a new, vibrant coalition, one that is going to take us into the future, one that is going to take us into the future with young people, with those in the trades. In my own region, we've 8 out of 10 new MPs from York region. That's a lot to build on, and I think that Mr. Poilievre is the guy to do that. So we're behind him 100%. And in terms of how to go forward in an election, it's about additive, not subtracting for us.
If you are also behind him, why would you vote to adopt the Reform Act?
Well, I think members in the caucus have always adopted that. They've adopted that with...
They didn't with Andrew Scheer in 2019,
which
the headline out of that was, endorsement of his leadership. Didn't end up going that way.
I think caucus gives itself the tools to act, but I don't think there's been anybody in caucus who's expressed any kind of... obviously, it's disappointing that we didn't get the result that we wanted, but I think Pierre is the guy to take us into the next election, and I hope that's sooner rather than later.
And what about Jenny Byrne? Should she remain on in the capacity that she has?
Yeah, look, I think Jenny is one of the best strategists that this country has seen. I think she's a campaign manager that understands the ground game better than most others. There are lots of things that we can change, and frankly, I'm just going to tell you, I don't think Jenny and Pierre are those things, but we should take a look at what we can do better, how we can add to our coalition, and frankly, we may or may not come back to you. It might be an internal process that we look at in terms of what we can do better in the next go-around. But for now, we're going to focus on our priorities in Parliament, making sure that we hold the government to account, a government that's set a very, very tall order for itself and so far hasn't delivered for Canadians.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. Thank you for your time, Ms. Landsman.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it. As always, Melissa Landsman is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. You've heard a lot here between Minister McKinnon and Ms. Landsman. We're going to unpack it a little bit later on in the show with our front bench. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Laura Stone, and Hannah Thibodeau will be here. Plus, after a short commercial break, you'll hear from the leader of the NDP, Don Davies. We're back in a moment with a special edition of Power Play. Welcome back to Power Play. You're looking live inside Rideau Hall, where King Charles is expected to meet any moment now with Indigenous leaders. He earlier met with the Governor General and her husband, and most recently, just a few moments ago, Queen Camilla was sworn into the King's Privy Council. All of this, of course, ahead of the big event that's set to take place in Ottawa tomorrow. The King will deliver what's known as the speech from the throne just outside that room that you're looking at right now. I'm going to head over to my colleague, our national news correspondent, Abigail Beeman, who has been following the royal visit all day. Abigail, it's great to have you with us. Give us a sense of what this day looked like after the Queen and King touchdown.
That's right. So I think pomp and circumstance may be one of the most overused expressions, but that really is what it looked like. A highly orchestrated, highly choreographed event and many moving pieces as this unfolded. So we saw the pictures of the King and Queen arriving, greeting students, greeting Indigenous leaders. They then headed to a farmer's market here in Ottawa, and that was followed by a tree planting here where I'm standing just across the road on the grounds of Rideau Hall, a ceremonial tree planting. I think my favorite fact of the day, and I've said it a few times now, is that the dirt from that tree planting came from all 13 provinces and territories. So a little bit of all parts of Canada represented as that tree was planted. And right now, everything is still unfolding inside. You mentioned waiting for that audience with the Indigenous leaders to have with the King. That was a late addition to the schedule today, as well as those other events that you mentioned, which have wrapped up. So notably, the audiences between the Governor General and the King and the Prime Minister and the King. And while we don't get details, nothing is released from those audiences, it is safe to assume that the content of the throne speech would be discussed in Mark Carney's audience with the King.
And you're looking live inside the room at Rideau Hall there, where there was just a quick photo op with King Charles and Natin Obed. Natin Obed is the president of the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami. He actually, if I recall, Abigail, was at the King's coronation in England, and he's just sitting down there with the King as we speak. It's all a preface to the big event tomorrow, where the King is set to deliver the speech from the throne. What can you tell us about what our expectations should be where that's concerned?
So I think that everybody will be listening really closely to just what is in that throne speech. Of course, it's such a unique and historic occurrence in that it's only the third time that a monarch will deliver that throne speech, Queen Elizabeth doing so in 1957 and 1977. But this moment, of course, stands out as Canada is in a trade war with the United States. And the political watchers and royal watchers that talk about the symbolism of having the King of Canada delivering that throne speech, sending a message to Donald Trump that Canada is not the 51st state, and underlined, of course, by Donald Trump's own affection for the royal family. He likes the King, he likes the royal family. We saw how he reacted with pleasure to that invitation for an unprecedented second state visit with the King. So the hope is that he will be, or the expectation is that he will be watching this tomorrow, and the hope is that he will see the underline in bold that the King is here as Canada is not the 51st state.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much, Abigail. Lots of pictures there of the King and Queen greeting royal watchers and enthusiastic Canadians at Lansdowne Park here in Ottawa. As Abigail mentioned, there will be a host of events tomorrow that precede the speech from the throne. We're going to carry it live, all right here on CTV News Channel. Speaking of that speech from the throne, there's a lot of content we have to dissect now that the House of Commons is back. And as promised, NDP MP Don Davies is my next guest to do just that. We're back in just a few moments here on Power Play.
To be clear, I didn't deny the request. In the law, 12 members are required to have recognized party status in the House. So I was merely stating fact. In order to change that, it would require a broad consensus of the House of Commons, a consensus that I'm unaware exists as of this point. However, there have been a number of constructive conversations with Mr. Davies. I know he's had some with some of the other opposition parties. He certainly has with me. I'm very open to entertaining some of his more practical requests.
That is the government's House Leader Steve McKinnon earlier on this show talking about NDP official party status, or really lack thereof. Here to talk a bit more about the party and its direction during this sitting of the House of Commons on this first day back for MPs is the interim leader of the NDP, Don Davies. He's live with me here on Parliament Hill. Hi, Mr. Davies. It's good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Good to be with you, Vashi.
I did want to start off on official party status. It sounds like the government is not prepared to facilitate a process that would allow for that. Do you understand the position that it would be a slippery slope if that precedent were to be set?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a couple different routes. What the NDP really wants is we're going to do our job no matter what. But we want the tools that will allow us to participate fully in Parliament. These are legislative research, communications resources that will help us do our job better. As you know, Vashi, Parliament is complex. It moves fast and it changes. And what we're looking for is the ability to bring the voices of 1.2 million Canadians to this House and to effectively participate in the affairs. So official party status is an elastic concept. It has been changed many times in provinces across this country. Conservatives to Liberals, Liberals to NDP, NDP to Greens, even CAQ relaxed the number with Solidaire and with Parti Québécois. So it's something that can be worked with, but really what we're interested in is just getting the resources that we need to do our jobs better.
I ask this with great respect, but why does your party deserve them? Yes, there are 1.2 million Canadians who voted for you, but you had an 11-point-something% drop in the popular vote, the worst outcome seats-wise for your party since its inception. Like, why do you deserve parliamentary resources if you couldn't hit that number?
Because it's
or come close to it with respect.
Because it's a minority parliament. And in a minority parliament, every vote counts. And so when you've got a government that has 169 seats and they need 172, and we have 7 seats, very often our party is going to be called upon that to make the difference. And so for us to be able to understand what legislation is being called and when, I think is important to make this parliament function well. So it's a question of ensuring that all the parties in a minority parliament are able to discharge their responsibilities in a responsible way and make it function well. So that's why I think it's a little bit different now than in a majority parliament.
Is that true, though? Because I think of Elizabeth May, for example, and Mike Morris in the parliament that existed before. They were able to govern themselves and vote on legislation and understand what it's about without the resources that you're describing. So again, is this, like, I don't understand why you would need it and not them.
Well, the significance of them voting one way or another wasn't perhaps the falling of a government. It is in our case. I remember 1979, Joe Clark, where a government fell by accident. That can happen. And so in this case, if we want stability and we want a government that's functioning well, then we have to make sure parties are resourced appropriately. So I'd say that's one major difference. The other one is that the kind of resources we're talking about, Vashi, are things like, do we have access to the online voting dashboard so that this tracks when people are voting when they're traveling, and if you can tell or not whether someone has voted. These are things that I think just help us function better. They're not something that gives us a great advantage. It makes sure that we can cast our votes in a responsible way.
Minister McKinnon seemed open to the possibility of other stuff without acquiescing on the point of official party status. Is it satisfactory to you? Like, would you be able to work with kind of an ad hoc system of what you just described?
Well, really what we're after are the tools that we need to do our job better. And
can you do that without official party status? Is a more succinct way of asking.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. There's different routes for this. Official party status is one way, but if that can't be done, then the Board of Internal Economy has the ability to allot legislative, research, communications resources to different parties. They control that. And in a minority parliament, there's give and take in negotiations. And so that's what we're seeking to be done. You
described your party today, and you did it once here as well, as like holding the balance of power. Is that really the case? I mean, they need 3 people from other parties to support them. The Conservatives have signaled on issues around the economy and U.S. trade, for example, they would. The Bloc has been even more forthright. François Blanchet has said, we basically have a truce and we'll support them, we'll keep them there for a year. Why does the government need the NDP at all?
Well, let me be very specific. We said that we have a balance of power, not the balance of power, a balance of power. So,
do you even have that, though, with the Bloc saying they'll do it for a year?
Sure we do. The NDP is the only party in the House of Commons, I think, that truly represents the interests of working people in this country. We're a party that was formed by working people, for working people, and the policies that we usually put forth are policies that no other party does. For instance, improving our healthcare system, having universal dental care, having universal pharmacare. That's not going to come from the Conservatives. It's not going to come from the Bloc Québécois. So
It came from the Liberals.
no, it came from the NDP. And
But the Liberals implemented it under your influence, but they still implemented it, and then they got the credit for it.
Because we demanded it. That's why they implemented it. They voted against those things when they were in majority government. So they did those things because the NDP demanded it and made it happen. So depending on the legislative agenda of this government, they will need the NDP for progressive legislation, unless Mr. Carney is not intending to govern in any progressive manner, which remains to be seen. But if he does want to, he's going to have to count on a national party who supports those policies, and that very well could be us.
How soon will your party select a permanent leader? You're serving in the capacity as interim leader. How soon is your party going to? How soon do they need to?
Well, in the first question, that is a question that's being discussed by our party right now. So our party officials have the responsibility to determine when the leadership race happens. There are some things that have to happen before that, including a good assessment of the previous campaign. And we've promised a visioning process for our members to help reimagine what a renewed progressive NDP offer looks like going forward. I think those are important building blocks that need to happen before we launch into a leadership review. So I think you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 months or so, give or take. And how soon should they do it? Well, again, that's up to the party. But I do think
What do you think, as somebody who lived through this election, how soon would you like to see the party have a new direction and a new leader?
Well, I do very strongly think that we need an honest, thorough assessment of where we've come from. And I really do think we need to reconnect with our grassroots membership and supporters and involve them in the reimagining of our party. So it's a bottom-up process, not a top-down process. And I think we need to take the time that's needed to get that done. I wouldn't rush that. So I think it depends on how fast we can get that going. And, I think if we reconnect with our membership and people across this country, then I think we will form the foundation of a much stronger New Democratic Party moving forward. And we've been in this position before, Vashi. We've come out of it before, and I think we can come out of it again.
I have to leave it on that note. Mr. Davies, a pleasure. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi.
Don Davies is the interim leader of the NDP. After a short commercial break, more of the special edition of Power Play just ahead. Our front bench is next. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Laura Stone, and Hannah Thibodeau will join me. Back in a moment.
I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason.
Debates should be passionate. They should be lively. The lives of Canadians are changed by the decisions we make, and so it is normal that members get enthusiastic and fiery. When the stakes are so high, often the best thing you can do is allow the players to play a little bit.
Just a little flavor there from the House of Commons on this day one of Parliament returning. MPs are back in the House after 5 months away. We've got a ton to unpack with our front bench. Joining me this evening here from Parliament Hill is Dan Moulton. Let me just make sure I have my proper, I know you're with Crestview Strategy, former senior advisor, there we go, to the Liberal, no prompter today, guys, it's rough for everyone. Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. He's now, as I mentioned, with Crestview Strategy. Shakir Chambers is a vice president at Oyster Group. He worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. Hannah Thibodeau, next to me, is of course a former news anchor. She's now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. And Laura Stone rounds us out. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Dan, I'm going to start with you. If this, 3 to 4 weeks here in Parliament is going to be defined by one thing, after watching, today's events, what do you think it's going to be?
Well, honestly, I think Canadians sent a business-like prime minister to Ottawa to form a business-like government, and I think they want to get down to business, right? Like, that is what is clear to me, and I think we're going to hear that a lot tomorrow in the throne speech, is a lot of quick action to move forward an agenda that responds to the moment we're in. Canadians are feeling anxious. They're feeling anxious about the big picture, and I think they're feeling anxious still about their everyday life. And so if I'm expecting to see one thing consistently from this government, it's one that's trying to take on those macroeconomic problems to send signals to investors that this is a good place to come do business, that we can do big things and build big things. And I think a government that's going to say, we also understand the microeconomic. We understand that people are anxious about their household finances, about the safety of their communities. And I think they're going to send a lot of very clear signals over the days ahead and the weeks ahead that they're getting down to business on those things.
Yeah, the vibes, Hannah, I think Dan's absolutely right, are all about getting down to business. I'm wondering, though, about expectation setting from where you sit, right? Because it's not, to Dan's point, we're going to transform the economy at the macro level. We're going to address all your very punctuated issues at the micro level. And we're going to do it by making us the strongest economy in the G7. Like, it's a tall order. You know, is there any worry about setting expectations so high?
Absolutely. You know, I think what they need to do is under-promise and over-deliver. That was Jean Chrétien's theme throughout all of his years, and I think that's what they need to take on. It is that they are building up these expectations, you know, solve this problem with the United States, get the tariffs taken off, rebuild the economy, also nation building. Those are huge things to get done in the next 2 weeks, really, because the House usually rises right before Canada Day. The next couple of weeks are going to be imperative for this Prime Minister to set that tone. Today was a very good day for him in setting, you know, just the symbolism of, look, we're going to take care of what's happened with our American president and the 51st state. We're going to set that tone right away by inviting, and I was talking to Dan earlier, whoever came up with that idea of inviting the king to deliver the speech from the throne.
It was Carney's idea.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it was all the Prime Minister.
He did it before he was even formally elected.
Exactly. Yeah. When he went over there, he went to France, he went to see the king, and all of these things, it's like, that is really forward thinking. If he continues this type of forward thinking and these types of chess moves going way ahead, like, it's not just one chessboard. I find he's actually thinking 2 chessboards ahead. And those are the types of things that he's going to have to do and continue to play that way if Canadians are going to continue to trust in what he's set out for his tone.
Yeah, Shakir, I think Hannah makes a good point about the symbolism of everything, the pomp and circumstance, like the vibe check that we've been talking about. But I guess what I'm trying to get at with the question of expectations is that they imply a certain level of resolve. Like, if you're going to transform the economy or say that you're going to, you actually have to, and that's not easy to do. I'm wondering how you think that might inform this sitting, but even beyond.
I actually just want to see what he's going to do. I think Mark Carney needs to close the gap between his ambition and the actions to actually achieve that ambition. I've heard a lot about the vision. You know, I saw the 7 points of the ministers. Those are all great and those are all fine, but what are you actually going to do in some concrete detail? You talk a lot about national energy projects. What are those projects that you actually care about that you're going to move forward? You talk about addressing crime. How are you specifically going to address crime? I think that's my problem. Mark Carney right now, so far, has talked a really good game, and it sounds fantastic, but I do want to see concrete actions. I'm hoping tomorrow with the throne speech, he puts some meat on those bones and tells us what he's actually going to achieve. I mean, here's a guy who, you know, ran as a change candidate. So again, tell us some detail about what is that change that's going to be so different than what we saw from the past 10 years? Here's a guy who, you know, as Ms. Natsman said on your interview, Pierre was criticized for being a guy all about slogans. I think for the last month, all I've heard from Mark Carney is high-level messaging and high-level slogans. Turn those slogans into substance and let us know what you're actually going to do to turn things around. And until he gets to that point, I don't see anything that he's doing that's been any different so far.
Do you anticipate that point comes sooner rather than later, Laura?
Yes, I do. I think that Prime Minister Carney is probably going to introduce 1 or 2 concrete things that he thinks he can do quickly. And I think we've seen that through your interviews today, Vashi, and other interviews you've done recently with members of the government, and an income tax cut and stripping away barriers to interprovincial trade. I think those are 2 things that the government is going to try to act on quickly, that they can show Canadians that they're making concrete moves. You see, I think that the stripped down language that the Liberals have presented of what their government's about, and that was symbolically contained in the mandate letter to all the ministers, which is, you know, here are 7 key points that we're focused on, and you know, if you're with a ministry that doesn't touch on this, well, good luck to you. But I think that it's clear that the government is going to try to move on 1 or 2 points very quickly here in the limited time that they have before the summer. Maybe they will extend into the summer, but I think the government certainly is setting expectations very high, but you can do that when you're fresh, right? And Justin Trudeau did that too, and he had very high expectations and high hopes for himself. Check in with Mr. Carney in year 3, year 4, see how that's going. But there's kind of no harm in really setting the stage high right now, I think, because the public is probably going to, and even the opposition, as we've seen maybe a bit more of a conciliatory tone from the opposition of being willing to work with the government, give them the benefit of the doubt, at least in the first few months of their mandate.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the opposition, Dan. Where do you think the positioning of the government leaves opposition parties at this moment?
Well, look, I think there are certain issues that the Conservatives have performed very well on over the last few years, particularly when it comes to crime and safety and it comes to everyday affordability. They were outflanking the Liberals on those key issues, and the Liberals were the beneficiary of a moment the last few months where the conversation shifted completely to Canadian sovereignty, a crisis of our nation, really, right? And that benefited them in the election period. I think Conservatives are still stronger on those issues. And that's why it's going to be really important for the Liberals to continue to push forward an agenda that combats that and takes that directly on with the Conservatives and tries to take some of that ground away from them. The other opposition parties, certainly, the Bloc have signaled that they intend to support the government and its agenda. This is a government that won a lot of seats in Quebec, and it owes a lot of its political fortunes to the province of Quebec. So I don't think the Bloc are going to be disappointed in what they see from this government's agenda over the years ahead. And frankly, I think the New Democrats are lost right now. I don't think they know where they are or what they stand for or what their future looks like. And it's going to be challenging for them.
Yeah, good luck for, opposition parties to, vote down nation-building projects.
Exactly.
Doing things.
I don't think they will.
No,
Nobody's
exactly.
signaling that they will.
No, exactly.
Right now.
No.
And that's the thing, those types of things. And that's what Mr. Carney is saying to the premiers, too. You only come back to me and tell me if this is a nation-building project that you can push forward. If not, don't start asking for more, because these are what things that we're focusing on right now. Also, when it comes to, getting tariffs off from the United States, we've already heard from the Conservatives that they would agree to help in those instances. So right now, I think Mr. Carney can run this government like it is a majority, because you're not going to see the NDP go, oh, let's topple this government right now. They are in dire straits. We just heard it from Don Davies a few moments ago. They don't know when their next leader is going to be elected. They have to go to their grassroots. So, right now, the cards are in Carney's hands.
Shakir, what are your thoughts on that in your best advice to opposition parties navigating the next few weeks?
I think right now the cards are in Carney's hands for this next 4 weeks. But to be quite frank, I don't think these 4 weeks truly matter for the opposition. I think folks are really watching. What are the Liberals going to do? What is the priority legislation? How does Mark Carney run a government? How quickly does he move things forward? I think all eyes are on Carney. And I think when we get past these 4 weeks, we get into the summer months, the fall sessions where we're really going to see things hit the fan. Pierre's going to be back in Parliament. We'll see where we are with Trump and tariffs. But the most important thing is the Liberals have to produce a budget. And there are going to be high expectations that they're going to be bold and do things that, that the previous Liberal government did not do. And so we'll see where they are at that point. But I think these next 4 weeks, nobody's really paying that much attention to what the opposition parties do. If I was advising the Conservatives, the only thing I would say is what Hannah said. I think for them, listen, cooperate on things that you had in your platform, resource development, crime issues, but you're still the official opposition. You have to oppose the government on certain things. And I don't think the Canadians don't want you to oppose certain things. It's just a matter of your tone. How you do it in this context really does matter. But I think Canadians still expect you to hold the government to account and oppose where you need to oppose.
Last word to you, Laura.
Well, I'm watching for, is it really a team effort? Is everyone on board? We saw in the first couple of weeks, some ministers were, I'll say it generously, a bit off message, I think, with what Prime Minister Carney has communicated to the public and what he said his government stands for. Are you going to have ministers running their mouths about pipelines and energy projects? How is he going to bring the premiers together? We have a high stakes meeting next week in Saskatoon with all the premiers. We know that they're not all on the same page when it comes to energy or pipeline projects. How is he going to speak to them and find common ground? So I think that there's the Liberals dealing with the opposition, but there's also the Liberals dealing with themselves. And we saw maybe a bit of a rocky first week or so for Mr. Carney. Is he able to bring everyone on board and promote that message that he's trying to tell the public about how focused and determined his government truly is?
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Dan Moulton, Hannah Thibodeau, Shakir Chambers, and Laura Stone. We're back in a moment with more of this special edition of Power Play from Parliament Hill.
Are you all working here? Majesty, I'm from British Columbia. British Columbia, nice to see you. That's a long way to go. Are you both British?
Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
Oh, come on. Good to see you again. I did your 14th visit.
King Charles III and Queen Camilla there in Ottawa. They have spent the day, or rather most of the afternoon, I should say, at a variety of different stops through our nation's capital. Most recently, they were at Rideau Hall meeting with the Governor General. The Queen, in fact, was sworn into the King's Privy Council, and then King Charles met with a variety of Indigenous leaders, all of that setting the stage for tomorrow's big event here in Ottawa, which is the King's delivery of the speech from the throne. The last time a monarch delivered the speech from the throne was all the way back in 1977. So, of course, we are going to have special coverage all morning long. Rather, myself and my colleague Omar Sachedina will host that special coverage from Ottawa. It gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow morning. We'll take you right through all the ceremony ahead of the speech from the throne. We'll also take a listen in live throughout the entire speech itself, which is not only about the symbolism of the king presenting it, but also the content of the speech. This is the speech that opens a session of Parliament, in this case, a new government led by Prime Minister Mark Carney. We will hear exactly what their priorities are intended to be, of course, against which we can measure whether the results come through over the next number of months, perhaps years, until another election. I'm going to leave this special edition of Power Play there. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.